Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are looking at a trait that so many of us secretly, or, not so secretly, wear as a badge of honor. You totally know the drill. You're sitting in a high-stakes job interview, they lean in, ask for your biggest weakness, and you do that humble sigh and say, well, I'm just too much of a perfectionist. We literally think it shows we work incredibly hard and care deeply about the results. But today, we are going to completely reframe perfectionism. We're taking it from a humble brag to exposing it as a literal psychological trap, using some amazing insights directly from clinical psychology.
So here is our roadmap for today. Section 1, Perfectionism, Virtue or Vice. Section 2, Inside the Perfectionist Mind. Section 3, The Decision-Making Trap. And finally, Section 4, Strategies to Break Free.
All right, let's dive right into Section 1, Perfectionism, Virtue or Vice. We are deconstructing the myth of striving.
The writer Ruben Chavez really hit the nail on the head here. He says perfectionism is a vice that often masquerades as virtue. And that is so true, right? It isn't just about having high standards. Ultimately, it's an overprotective mechanism, and it's totally fueled by a fear of failure and this deep-seated need for external validation. We try to convince ourselves that we're just trying to be our absolute best, but in reality, we are desperately trying to shield ourselves from criticism. We crave that validation because deep down, a perfectionist links their core worth to what other people think of their output rather than the actual intrinsic effort they put in.
Striving for excellence and perfectionism are honestly diametrically opposed. They are completely different things. Think of excellence as planting deep roots. It requires the absolute courage to learn from your mistakes. It's fueled by intrinsic motivation, meaning you actually want to grow for your own sake, and that builds incredible long-term resilience. You start viewing mistakes as necessary stepping stones. Perfectionism, on the other hand, it's kind of like hiding behind a really fragile, cracking shield. It is driven entirely by what others think of us. Because you view literally any mistake as a personal defect, you become incredibly fragile and honestly terrified of taking any real risks.
Moving right along to Section 2, Inside the Perfectionist Mind. Let's look at the clinical reality.
Have you ever felt like you were literally only as good as your last achievement? Well, according to clinical psychologists, that's actually a core component of clinical perfectionism. It basically involves three main traits. First, you have this relentless striving for extremely high, personally demanding standards. Second, you tie your entire self-worth to your ability to actually meet those rigid achievements, meaning if you fail, you aren't just disappointed in the result, you feel fundamentally worthless as a human being. And third, and guys, this is the major red flag, you continuously pursue these standards even when it severely costs you. Think about, staying up until 3 in the morning to perfectly format a spreadsheet, completely sacrificing your sleep, your physical health, and your peace of mind just for a tiny marginal gain.
Now, when we look at the cognitive behavioral model of clinical perfectionism, which was developed by researchers at the University of Oxford, we can see exactly how this trap operates in the brain. It starts right at the top. Your self-worth becomes overly dependent on achievement. This trickles all the way down into inflexible, impossible standards. And because those standards are so impossibly rigid, you inevitably perceive a failure to meet them. But here's the crazy part. Even if you do temporarily meet a standard, your brain plays a trick on you. It reappraises the goal as having been too easy to begin with. This constant perceived failure triggers really harsh self-criticism, anxiety, low mood, and totally counterproductive behaviors like excessive checking or endless procrastinating. And then all of that misery just feeds right back into the top of the loop, reinforcing this false idea that you simply need to try harder next time.
This whole clinical loop is kept spinning by some seriously powerful cognitive biases. Take dichotomous thinking, which is really just a fancy clinical term for all or nothing thinking. This is when you get a 98% on a performance review, but you feel like an absolute utter failure just because of that missing 2%. Anything short of absolute 100% perfection is viewed as a complete disaster. You also develop what's called a selective attention to failure. This means you vividly, painfully remember the one tiny typo you made in an email, while you completely ignore the 99 amazing things you handled perfectly that entire week.
Okay, Section 3. The decision-making trap. This is what happens when perfectionism causes serious friction in our lives. What should I have for breakfast? Should I take that new job? Where should I park my car? We literally make hundreds of choices every single day. But for someone struggling with perfectionism, second-guessing every single one of these choices quickly leads to an absolute state of decision fatigue. By the time you've weighed all the pros and cons of your breakfast options, your brain is already totally exhausted. We become completely paralyzed at the basic crossroads of everyday life, completely incapable of moving forward without excruciating mental effort.
So perfectionism basically creates these hidden obstacles in decision-making by linking really intense fear to the outcome. We become terrified of making the wrong choice, right? So we set these incredibly unrealistic expectations, falsely believing there's only one magical perfect option out there somewhere. And when we inevitably can't figure out what that perfect choice is, we catastrophize. We expect absolute worst-case scenarios from even the most minor decisions. This creates a massive discomfort with uncertainty, which just leaves us stuck in endless analysis paralysis. We will research for hours and hours, hoping to find that one magic piece of information that makes everything perfectly clear. And when we can't find it, we turn to looking for constant reassurance from others, completely losing all trust in our own judgment.
Which brings us to our final part. Section 4, Strategies to Break Free. Let's get into some actionable solutions.
Psychologists recommend taking some really concrete, actionable steps to finally bypass these perfectionist blocks. First, set realistic expectations. You just have to actively acknowledge that you simply cannot predict the future. Second, plan a reflection period. If you are stuck ruminating, dedicate just 30 minutes in the evening to weigh your options. Outside of that specific time window, you just gently redirect your mind to other tasks. Third, clarify your core values. Let them act as your internal compass so you can replace the need for external approval. Fourth, notice the unhelpful stories you tell yourself. Things like fortune-telling, which is assuming your boss will hate your project before you even hit send, or mind reading, where you project all of your anxieties onto the people around you. And fifth, you need to act as if.
Let's actually zoom in on that last one, because it's a truly powerful behavioral experiment. If you are stuck in analysis paralysis, try acting as if a decision is already finalized. Commit to one option for a few hours or, even a whole day. Just go about your routine acting as if that choice is permanently locked in. And during this time, just observe your emotional reactions. How does your body feel? Are you relieved? Are you physically tense? What is your mind actually telling you? Then, the next day, try it with the other option. By observing these bodily reactions, you gather some amazing intuitive insights. You actually tap into your gut instinct and cut straight through all that mental clutter.
But foundational to all of these strategies is learning to tolerate the unknown. You really must accept that there is rarely one single right decision in life. To overcome perfectionism, you absolutely have to actively practice sitting with the discomfort of doubt. So, when you feel that familiar urge to endlessly research or seek outside reassurance, just pause. Take a really deep breath, check in with your body, and let those anxious feelings just be there. Observe them without acting on them. That is how you break the deep-seated habit of chasing an impossible guarantee.
To truly break free from the trap of clinical perfectionism and actually move toward genuine excellence, I want to leave you with a rather provocative thought to reflect on today. Who are you, and what is your self-worth completely outside of your achievements? Seriously, if you couldn't put another accomplishment on your resume, how can you start valuing yourself? Because untangling your core identity from your output isn't just the cure for perfectionism, it's the beginning of true resilience. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.